Hey guys, so I just wanted to make this quick little video, gonna be a PSA. This video was inspired by a conversation that I had this morning. I've been having it all morning with this guy about colorism, because colorism has been a big thing recently, of course. And we ended up getting into a conversation about this concept that I've been seeing a lot of light-skinned people have and say that they feel like this is not really getting into the systemic and institutionalized sides of colorism, which I've touched on in my other video. Like systemic and institutionalized colorism is a thing wherein darker skinned people have it harder on all levels than light skinned people. Those are facts. That's not up for debate. But what I want to talk about is a personal feeling that I've seen a lot of light skinned people express that I never really understood, but that I kind of got into this conversation with this person, and it kind of got broken down in depth throughout the course of this conversation. We're talking about how a lot of times when you start talking about colorism, right? How a lot of light-skinned people, not all, of course, but some, one of the most common arguments you hear is that light-skinned people feel like you're questioning their blackness. And I never understood this. I always felt like, why do people say that? When you talk about light skin and dark skin, why is that one of the major, arguments or issues or problems that you hear? Like, oh, so you're saying I'm not black, saying I'm not black enough. That I never understood that, because I have tons of light-skinned friends and family members, and I especially want to say family members because my grandmother is white passing, and my great-grandmother, who I knew, she died when I was 12, 13 years old. I knew her. I called her grandma. She looked white, not just like white passing, not like squinting your eyes like, oh, is she white or black? My great-grandmother looked straight up white, and my grandmother is white passing. And I have tons of cousins that are racially ambiguous, none that are white passing, but light skin, green eyes, blonde hair, the whole thing. So whenever I heard people say like, oh, you're pointing out that I have light skin privilege, oh, you're saying I'm not black, it was always confusing to me, because it was like, I have family members that are light skin. I recognize that they have light skin privilege, but I would never say that they're not black, because we have the same blood. We have the same blood going through our veins. We're family. I couldn't understand it. I couldn't really wrap my mind around why people would say that. Oh, you're saying I'm not black enough. You're saying I'm not black. No, I'm just pointing out that you have privilege because you're light-skinned. You do have privilege. The same as, if you're pretty, you have privilege to a certain extent. You're still black, but you have privilege. If you're thin or if you have a nice body, you have privilege to a certain extent. If you have long hair, you have privilege to a certain extent. You're still black. No one's saying you're not black, but you still have privilege. But why is it when you start talking about skin color, which I kind of think of as, it's privilege just like any other type of privilege, no one wants to admit that they have privilege, because no one wants to say, hey, yes, I admit that I did have certain opportunities for things that maybe I didn't work for, and that's white people, that's male privilege, thin privilege, no one wants to admit that, but that doesn't mean that privilege doesn't exist, because it does. And if you have light skin privilege, you have light skin privilege. That's it. It exists. But that doesn't mean that someone is saying that you're not black. Even if you don't necessarily look black, even if you're passing or you're racially ambiguous or whatever, that doesn't mean that you're not black. And I just could not ever understand it until today, I guess, this morning. I'm having this conversation with this guy on Instagram, and we were talking for hours and hours, and I'm like, I don't understand it. And he's like, it's because, he's like, I feel like quantifying and qualifying blackness is wrong, and that's the root of colorism. I said, but I don't understand, why do light-skinned people feel like when we talk about colorism, we're quantifying blackness. We're trying to say you're more black or you're less black. No one's saying that. Like, you're black. No one's trying to take your blackness away from you. No one can take your blackness away from you. No one can give or take away blackness. But you can say, hey, I'm black. I'm light-skinned, but I am black. I know I'm black, but I do recognize that as a light-skinned person, I have a certain amount of privilege. I know that. I accept it. I'm going to work to check my privilege and to hold myself and others accountable when I notice it. I feel like that's not hard. That's not difficult. But you have people that would rather kick and scream and deny that they have privilege and try to turn it around and deflect and turn it into this, oh, well, but you're trying to say that I'm not black enough? And I could never understand what's the parallel, right, between having privilege and being black. The parallel, right, is that these people equate privilege with whiteness and oppression with blackness, which is fucking sick, right? That shit's fucking twisted, right? So they feel like when you say they have privilege, you're calling them white. And you're saying that since you're oppressed, you're more black. Because in their own minds, when they think privilege, they think white. And when they think oppression, they think black, right? Which is crazy, right? A rich black person is rich, so they're going to have privileges because they're rich. That does not mean they're not black. As I say all the time, you're going to get your Negro wake-up call one way or another, right? It's the same thing with skin color. Even though you have privilege because you're light skinned, you're still black, you're going to get your Negro wake-up call one way or another. You know, if you're sitting at your colonizer's table or not, if you're light skinned or not, if you're white skin passing or not. But you are still going to have privilege, even up to, including, and after that moment of your Negro wake-up call coming, right? So we're talking, and I realized, I was like, okay, so you guys really equate privilege with whiteness and oppression with blackness. So when people say that you have privilege, you feel like they're saying that you're white. He goes, yeah, and also you feel like people are saying you didn't have to struggle like a black person, so you're not black, right? He goes, you know, and everyone loves oppression, basically. Everyone loves an underdog. And me and one of my other commenters were talking about this, and we were talking about white people, how white people want to be oppressed, how white people will fight you tooth and nail to say, I don't have privilege, I go through this. Like, you still have privilege, and having privilege is not a bad thing. Like, we all wish we could have more opportunities. This oppression Olympics and wanting to be oppressed and looking at oppression as some type of, you know, badge of honor, some type of symbol of blackness, you know, within the black community and colorism is crazy to me. It's bizarre, right? Just because you're privileged doesn't mean you're not black, and just because you're oppressed doesn't mean you are black. There's tons of other types of oppression, you know. Oppression is not synonymous with blackness, and privilege is not synonymous with whiteness. And it's really twisted that we've kind of internalized that. And he also went on to say, you know, you feel like when people call you privileged, you know, you feel like they're saying you're not black because you feel like they're saying you didn't ever, you know, have to struggle like a black person, and you got all these things that you didn't earn, and it just makes you feel bad, and you just feel like they're saying you're not black. I was like, oh, so you feel guilty. So you have, you know, the black version of white guilt, light guilt, or light skin guilt. So we're not really talking about whether or not people are actually honestly questioning your blackness. No one's actually questioning your blackness when they point out your privilege. What they're doing is they're making you feel guilty. So you feel light-skin guilt. You feel a sense of survivor's guilt almost. That you survived something like slavery, but you came out on the other side with light skin, so you're benefiting from privilege that you didn't earn because we live in a racist, white supremacist, Eurocentric society. So you feel guilt. That's what this is really about, right? This is not about people, dark-skinned people or otherwise, accusing light-skinned people of being black enough. That's not what we talk about when we talk about privilege and light-skinned privilege. We're talking about light-skinned people feeling guilty, feeling light-skinned guilt, feeling survivor guilt for having privilege. So they turn it around almost, and they make it about, no, I don't have privilege. I'm just like you. I'm black just like you. I'm exactly the same as you. Even though studies have shown that on every level of society, light-skinned people do have a certain amount of privilege. And even within our own black communities, we put light-skinned people on a pedestal because we've internalized concepts of racism and things like that. But instead of saying, yes, I am black, but I am light-skinned, and I do recognize that I have privilege, and I'm working to unlearn it the same way we do with every other thing, we say, oh no, colorism is divisive, and let's not talk about it, and I don't want to hear about it, and you're challenging my blackness. You know, it's deflection. It's deflection from the real issue, which is guilt. Survivor's guilt. So to any light-skinned people watching this video, you don't have to feel guilty. You don't. You didn't ask to be born light-skinned, just like white people really didn't ask to be born white, just like none of us asked to be born black or dark-skinned or whatever. You didn't ask to be born light-skinned, but, you know, by the luck of the draw, you were born light-skinned, and you do have certain privileges. And I do feel like it is a part of your responsibility to know that, to understand it, to accept it, and to check it. Just like we tell white people, check your privilege. Understand, I'm light-skinned, so I'm probably going to have certain things given to me or offered to me because I'm light-skinned. And when I notice it, and when I, you know, maybe I can catch myself when I'm cracking a joke, or when I'm doing something, or when I, you know, if I'm with a group of friends and I notice that, you know, a bunch of black guys approach us and they say something to me and it's racial based, like, oh, look at that pretty light skin or something like that. Like, I can hold myself accountable and I can check it. You don't have to feel guilty, and you don't have to feel like anyone's questioning your blackness, because nobody's questioning your blackness. You're black. If you're black, you're black. However, recognize that you do have privilege, and don't feel guilt. And don't let that feeling of guilt or shame turn into anger against other, you know, against other black people, against dark-skinned people, and accusing them of trying to quantify or qualify your blackness or say you're not black. You know, that's a real personal problem. It's an issue. Dr. Joy DeGrasse goes into how we have all these issues and that we never receive therapy as a people, you know, and how we have all these issues, which I really feel like is still true. Because when I was talking to this guy, I was thinking, like, yo, dude, like, you need therapy. Like, if this is how light-skinned people really feel deep down, they feel this, like, guilt and shame about privilege, which is why they react so strongly and say that other people are accusing them of not being black. Like, we need some mass therapy, like, ASAP. But it's like, you don't have to feel guilty. You don't have to feel ashamed. Like, you have light skin and you do have privilege. That doesn't mean that anyone's saying you're not black. And no one is equating your privilege with whiteness either. You just have privilege. I'm a cute girl. I've always been a pretty girl my whole life, so I know I have certain amounts of privilege. But I'm still black, and somebody will still call me a nigga real quick. I'm under no illusions about that. So yeah, I just wanted to make this video, this like quick PSA. When people talk about light skin, dark skin, they are not questioning your blackness. Don't feel ashamed for being light skinned. Don't feel light skin guilt, survivor's guilt. You know, you don't have to click with this deflection and this anger and this defensiveness of, oh, so you're saying I'm not black just because I have privilege? There's no correlation between blackness and privilege, or oppression and blackness. So I just wanted to make this quick video. I hope it made sense. I've been really marinating on it since we had that discussion, because I really felt like I had a deeper light bulb moment. I know I mentioned this briefly in my other video, but I felt like I had a deeper light bulb moment from having this conversation about that's really what the root of the issue is: guilt. Light-skinned people feeling survivor's guilt because they feel like they don't have to go through what darker-skinned people have to go through, and it's not fair. So they lash out at darker-skinned people. And darker-skinned people, y'all shouldn't be lashing out at light-skinned people either. We have to deal with the institutionalized racism that we, you know, cycle amongst ourselves. That's not by lashing out. That's by checking ourselves, honestly. And checking it when we see it, when we witness it. So yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Hopefully I can upload it. YouTube is acting insane. As you guys could tell, I had to record the other one on the iPad and upload it. So if this one ends up recorded on the iPad too, you know what happened. YouTube wouldn't let me upload. Shit keeps getting stuck at 95%, and I don't know why. But yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this one. Let me know what you think in the comment section, because this is really, really interesting, and maybe I'll marinate on it some more and make another video next week. Let me know if it was like confusing or not easy to understand. Alright, see you guys next time. Food for thought as always. Peace.